Hello and welcome to the Rogue Monkey podcast. We're the show that shares stories and insights from different people all around the world. And our hope is to give you inspiration to challenge yourself as we explore some fascinating journeys, from sports to business, from arts to extreme adventurers, with previous guests including the captain of the Red Arrows, Netflix producers and Olympic champions. This week we're speaking to somebody who's competed at 3 Olympic Games, making her career in flying through the air, diving into water at 35 miles an hour. Following on from our last few episodes where we explored extreme decision making, we dive into the mind of someone who has had to make a huge number of decisions in under 1.5 seconds, the consequences of which can be extremely serious. We explore how the lessons from that extreme environment and the journey of an elite athlete can be transferred into post-athlete life. Just before we start today's discussion, a quick reminder just to give us a quick follow on social media and keep up to date as we continue to share lots of inspiring content. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. If you want to know more about the Rogue Monkey, please just drop us an email via hello@theroguemonkey.org or check out our website. Now on to today's discussion, and we are going to dive, excuse the pun, straight into it. And episode 59 of the Rogue Monkey podcast. Tonia Couch, achieving the Olympic dream. But what comes next? Taking lessons from sport into life. Hello Tonia, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hi, are you alright? I'm good, thank you. Nice to meet you.
And you, excited to share a little bit of time with you and explore your journey, but to give our listeners and viewers a bit of an introduction, kind of who are you and what's your headline journey been?
So my name's Tonia Couch and I was a hardball diver for 18 long years. Yeah, had the most amazing time, went to 3 Olympic Games, 3 Commonwealth Games and just so many more competitions as time went on.
Well, plenty to explore there for sure, but I'm really curious to kind of go back to where it all started, because you got thrown into the sports world pretty young and got hooked into, I guess, of what became a full-time profession very young. So how did that all come about right at the start?
Yes, I was a gymnast I was gymnast from 7 till about 10, so 3 years. And I dislocated, broke and fractured my elbow all at once. I pinged off the bars and I think a few days before my 10th birthday. And off to the hospital I went, and they said, actually, you'll never be able to put weight on your arm ever again. And for a person being so crazy and sporty, that was a big shock to the system. So I worked really, really hard with the physio, and I actually was able to put weight on again. But gymnastics side kind of felt a little bit like a setback. So somebody actually said to my mum, why don't she try something like diving? It's very similar, good fun. And off I went, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I met amazing friends. It seemed a little bit more, less strict than gymnastics. You know, everyone seemed a little bit more of a family, and it was really, really nice. And yeah, first competition after 6 weeks, I won it. And I think after that, the rest is history, really. I stayed on to diving. So yeah, best move of my life. So thank you to the bars that actually dislocated my elbow.
Just as a little disclaimer for listeners out there, we're not advocating that you go and dislocate your elbow, because it's going to help you find a path in life.
Do not try this at home.
I guess, you've already mentioned there about the fact your mum kind of was helped signposting you into it. So what was those early years like? Because at such a young age, you obviously, you have a very wide-eyed approach to the world. You can do anything, you can do what you want, but you're obviously reliant on parents, your immediate friends and family and stuff around you. So what was that early environment like for you, kind of going into that sport?
Yeah. Because I was always one to be into sport. You know, me and my sister was very different. My sister wasn't into sport. She did a little bit of gymnastics, but it wasn't really her thing. So I think my mum and dad knew I needed to do something. Otherwise, I would be climbing up the walls and all sorts. So yeah, as soon as I went into the diving world, I just felt like it was a second family, and it just fitted into my life perfectly. And luckily for my mum and dad, they were so supportive. They used to drive me here, there and everywhere. Shame, I probably made them very skint throughout the years, but sport was pretty much my life, really. You know, I looking back now, God, I couldn't even imagine life without sport. But yeah, it's pretty mad. Pretty
Do you
mad.
think? Do you think? Obviously, you had quite a big challenge and hurdle getting into sport per se with the injury. When you went into diving, was it plain sailing across 3 Olympics from starting out, or was there any challenges
No,
along the way?
no, there was a few chapters along the way. I'm sure we'll get to it later, but there was in 2012, even though I technically qualified to go to the Olympics, they didn't actually send me as an individual diver, even though that I'd been, unbeaten throughout the year. Yeah, that was a little bit of a hurdle because the boss sent somebody that was his next door neighbor, even though she'd finished below me. So yeah, it was definitely not an easy ride for me, especially the older I got.
How's that impacted you now? Because obviously the resilience, I guess, that we build up through sport, amongst many other traits, kind of carry forwards into the rest of our lives. So, amongst some of those hurdles, what have you taken from some of those earlier experiences in sport and that you still use today?
I think if you work hard at something, to be fair, first of all, if you enjoy something, then you work hard at it. And if something tells you no, you can't do it, or something sets you back, as long as you've tried and you've proved to yourself, people know around you that, for example, when I didn't qualify, people knew around me that I should have gone. And I think as long as people knew that, then that was never an issue. Like, so just work your butt off. If you want something, you go get it. Don't let anybody tell you no.
So I'm guessing 3 Olympics, 3 very different Olympics in terms of your
Very different.
experiences there. Talk us through that journey, especially now looking back on it, because I think at the time it can be very much you just immerse yourself so much in that world. Now you've stepped out of it a little bit and look back. What are kind of the standout memories of those different Olympics you went to?
Do you know what? There's so many standout memories. Do you know what the main memory for me was in 2008? So I think I was about 18, 19 years old. It was my first Olympic Games. I went with Tom, both of us from Plymouth, our first one. Even though the whole place was amazing, the village was incredible. The people were like famous that you were having. I was having breakfast with Andy Murray at one point. But none of those memories will stick to me as much as the memory when I made it to the final, which I never ever went in the Olympic Games expecting to final when at that young age. I remember seeing my mum and dad up in the crowd when I marched on. And for me, that was the most amazing experience and something that I will never, ever forget. But my dad with this big GB flag on, my mum with a GB flag dress that she had made, just cheering and with massive smiles on her face. Honestly, that there for me, hands down, will beat any other memory in my lifetime. Crazy, isn't it?
No, it's awesome. And I think you hear a lot of that from especially athletes, that their parents have formed such a huge part of their journey that when they look back, those are some of, I guess, the standout memories, because for them, it's emotionally, it means the world to them. And it's personal to you. No one can take that away.
Absolutely. And, they've dropped me 7 o'clock in the morning at times to the pool, then picked me up, dropped me to school, take me from school in the afternoon back to the pool. They have been a massive part of my life. For them to be able to watch, you go into the biggest event of your life and making a final was just, they bought tickets to watch the final because, well, why wouldn't you if you're at the games? They didn't buy it to expecting me to final. And the fact that they were able to watch me in the semis and the prelims and the semis and the final was just, sensational. Absolutely incredible.
And you were quite a trailblazer, kind of looking back and doing a bit of reading before our discussion today, that you were one of the most successful female divers Great Britain had ever had up to that point. So you were in uncharted territory. What was that like? Because I think often if you take a Tom, for example, he could have lent on people like perhaps Leon and other people that had previously come through the system. Whereas for you, being that right out in front, what was that like?
I liked it. I mean, throughout my whole career, I kind of went into the sport with no pressure on myself. There's times, obviously, there's going to be huge amounts of pressure, but everyone always used to be like, what's your aim? What's your goal? And I was like, just to do well. And some coaches might not have liked it, but it worked for me, because if I went in there saying I'm going to go in there to come 6th place. Then it'll probably end up coming 16th place, you know? So I used to go in there and be like, no, I'm going to enjoy this and I'm going to try my hardest. And every single time, that is what the outcome was. Because pressure is good to have a little bit, like nerves, but too much pressure, it will just completely crumble and go the opposite way. And I think a lot of the young divers now that are up and coming is all well and good when they're young, but then as soon as they get into the pressured environment, it's a whole new ball game. So I never really let anyone affect me in that sense. I was like, no, I'm just going to do me and I'm going to have fun. Let's see where that ends up. And it worked. It worked.
And what was that like, I guess, going to your final Olympics? Because by that point, you've got some very young members on the team coming through and they're looking up to you, I guess, for that sort of advice. And were there any kind of pearls of wisdom that you passed on to, I guess, that next crop of divers?
I think so. So Lois from Leeds was my synchro partner. She was 16 at the time. So yeah, I was like, 10 years older than her. And they had put us together 8 months before Olympic Games, which is a little bit crazy because some of these athletes from like Canada, they've been together 10 years to do synchro, 8 months. We'd hardly even known each other. But I feel like over a few competitions before the Olympic Games, I might have helped her in some sense of the nerves to calm her down. Like, this is a big deal being with someone a lot older than you, hopefully I was fun for her, but I helped her in little things like she wouldn't eat breakfast on the morning of her competition because she was so nervous. But by the time the Olympics come and after doing a few World Series, she was eating breakfast, she was laughing. So I hope without me realizing a few of my traits have like gone over to her. And now she's the older one and she's doing the same to the younger one. So hopefully without me realizing, I've helped her quite a lot.
That's cool. I want to talk a little bit more just about Rio, because for the divers, especially with some of the challenges around the facility, the watercolor changing halfway through the competition.
I kind of liked it.
Well, I was going to ask, especially having been, Beijing was such a crazy event. And then obviously you had the home Olympics as well. Going into Rio, there was probably some things that probably upset and derailed quite a few other athletes out there that didn't have those experiences. So what kind of, I guess, tools and wisdom did you draw upon when you're out there and some of those challenges came to you?
Just to learn to look at it in a positive way. So the pool's green. Everyone was like, oh no, what are we going to do? I was like, brilliant. This is class. We can see the pool instead of seeing the sky and the pool, because the sky's blue, the pool's blue. When you're in an outdoor diving pool, you ain't got a clue. You have not got a clue. So I was like, Lois, the pool's green. We've got this. And it worked really well. We dived really good. I think we dived the best we ever dived, apart from the last dive. I think the pressure did get to her a little bit, which understandably 16 years old, but I just like to turn everything into a positive, and clearly it did work for me in my whole experience of diving, really. And I think I'm quite laid back, which some people overthink. Some people would be like, oh my God, the green pool, what are we going to do? It's going to get me ill. It did get me ill, but I was like, hey, who cares? So as long as you think the pool is half full, not half empty, is just the best way to be.
That's a great mentality to have. At what point, and I talked before we started recording about, I guess, what comes next. At what point on this journey, when you finished 3 Olympics, you've had all these accolades, won these international medals, did you start thinking, I really need to start thinking about what comes next? Was that something that happened whilst you were going through, I guess, the latter part of your career, or did you stop diving and then go, what now?
I think the last year of my career, I stopped and thought, right, okay, I'm going to go into coaching because that's what I love. And that's kind of all I know. But I wish I kind of thought a little bit longer. I think my head was just so far in the game. I kind of forgot that there is a life after diving. So yeah, it was a tough one. And it was weird. It was maybe good for the first year. And then after a year, it was a little bit like, okay, this has actually happened now. My diving has stopped. I am in the real world. I had my first job at the age of 28 or 27. That was weird. But yeah, I kind of wish I looked back now and thought a little bit clearer and a little bit earlier on. But hey ho, can't do anything now about it.
Something as well that I guess jumps out for me is that the support, I hope, generationally has got better and better and better. Probably 20 years ago, no one was having the conversation about what comes next. And perhaps through, technology, and I know you're quite a big social media user, you've got a much better ability to, I guess, forge your own path of what comes next instead of hoping that somebody hands something to you. So what's that been like coming through as, I guess, the new school generation of athletes? Because I know, talking to, say, Olympians from like the 90s and the 80s, when they finished, if they didn't medal, that was it. They would occasionally get brought up in conversation at a dinner party, but that would be it. There would be no career post that. They would have to then start from zero. Whereas, so how's that been for you?
I don't know, because I've kind of kept my social media following. It has gone down a little bit, of course. I don't know why I've done that. I think I'm just myself. I'm not really one. Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. It's so strange, because luckily social media has helped us do that. Like you said, back in the 90s, that would have been like, see you later, where have they gone? I don't know. That was a really tough question. I don't know about that one.
That's all right. Tough questions are good. One thing I'm really curious about, because in one of our recent episodes, we interviewed a guy called Brad who talked about extreme decision making, and we were talking about polar explorers and people that survive, if you like, in extreme environments. And every time I watch an international diving event, it blows my mind when they turn around and say, right, it's going to be over in like 1.5 seconds or whatever the time it is. And yet there's so many intricate things that you have to think about. Now, in life, we often overthink things that might go on for days or weeks, and yet you've sometimes got seconds to think about 5 or 6 things and just make snap decisions. So how did you do that? Like, what was the way in which you forged that mindset of being able to think really quickly in the moment? But now, how have you used that going forward into your, I guess, post-diving career?
Yeah, it's funny actually, because it is done like that. But sometimes we've all said to each other, so it's not just me that feels this way, we've all said to each other, sometimes you can have a whole conversation with yourself in that tiny seconds, but it feels like you're going on and on and on. Your brain must just go mental, because I could have a full-on conversation in the middle of my dive, yet I'm only in the air for 1.5 seconds. It's nuts, isn't it? I think moving on in my life, like you said, a lot of people overthink and it goes on a few days. With sport, some people, it's not the answer for everyone, but some people, like you said, really do overthink. And I have never been one to overthink things. Like a couple of my friends actually said before, they were like, God, I wish I was you. Why do I overthink all the time? And I'm just like, off with the fairies. But I think that was my diving. If I overthought or something, I wouldn't been able to take off. You can stand at the end of that board, and if you overthink, you end up forgetting what you can do. So a lot of divers, if they overthink, they can't take off. So they have to walk down the stairs, restart. So I learned watching that I cannot overthink. So sometimes I was in a handstand singing Britney Spears because if I start thinking, I've got to flick, twist and somersault, then I couldn't do it. So I would just not think anything, or have a little sing song, take off, and then I think, was I'm in the air. And that's when the full-on conversation can happen in the air to yourself. It's nuts. But I think that's what helped me with my diving world. And even my mum and dad laugh and say, like, she don't overthink, but it works. Keep it that way and just carry on life like that, really.
Talking about thought processes, what is it like walking out in, say, the Water Cube or at London Aquatic Centre with 15, 20,000 people there, especially at a home event, and obviously being so young when you were in Beijing? Just talk us through that, because obviously we see the dives and we see all of that, but we don't see what goes on behind the eyes when you actually get off the top ladder and you're standing out there. And do you take it all in, or do you go into tunnel vision mode? Like, just talk us through.
I'd say. I remember in London, myself and Sarah, before our synchro event, put our heads through the door, and then we got caught. So the whole crowd just like cheered. And then when we went back, we were like, oh my God, Oh God, we have to go out there. So then all of a sudden we had jelly legs, which was never fun. But yeah, as soon as you hear that cheering, you just get like goosebumps and you're like, come on, I want to do this. And then as soon as the whistle goes, everyone's silent. You completely forget that people are even there. You're just in the zone. Right, I'm ready to do this. Yeah, there's that extra little bit of pressure. But it's a really, really nice feeling. And it does want to like push you to just do even better. There was times where we did a few World Series at London and the crowd wasn't half as big, but it was still quite large. And I remember everyone cheering, and we got a second place in the World Series. And when we got on that podium and they called out from Great Britain, Tonia and Sarah, oh, it was just magical. Yeah, it was phenomenal.
For our listeners and viewers out there, if you want to listen to the viewpoint from your diving partner, Sarah was on our second season. So definitely go back and listen to that one. I want to talk, I guess, a little bit now about what comes next, because as I said, it's so hard, I guess, letting go of that, especially when you went into it so young, because it wasn't like you'd made your career's choice at 15, 16, then you'd gone through sixth form or maybe university and then gone, oh, actually, I'm going to do diving for a bit. You know, by the time you were at early teens, you're already completely immersed in this world. So what were kind of the key support things that allowed you to make that transition? Who was around you and what did that kind of transition look like?
So I think I'm about 14 or 16, no, 14, or maybe before, I'm not sure. Tom actually left Plymouth to move to London. So I had already lost one of like my best friends. Another friend called Brooke, she didn't quite make the Olympics, but she had been to Commonwealth and World Series, world events and stuff. She had retired. So I lost two of my good friends. Then Sarah retired straight after the Olympics. So I lost three of my good friends. And then I was kind of the only one there with quite a young group, which were fun. They were amazing. But, you know, I was an adult. So I had lost my special friends that I'd seen day in, day out. And my coach wanted to move to Australia, but he didn't want to leave until I left, because he was my coach from 10 years old. He was my coach, my only coach. Yeah, I had other coaches to help out, but he was my main coach throughout my whole career. So he didn't want to just get up and leave me just to do my own thing. So I think it got to a point where we sat down, we spoke where we want to go, how long we want to do it for. And when we both stopped together. And a year after the Olympic Games, I decided it was time. You know, I had none of my best friends there training anymore. And it makes huge difference. He wanted to go to Australia and we just thought, you know what, this is the perfect time. And it was nice that we were able to retire together. That's
really, really cool. And I think it can often get underplayed, even with athletes that haven't made it to the highest levels, the impact that their coach has on their journey. You know, even, you know, many of my social groups from the years of swimming, I still keep in touch with the coaches, and I know they do from across their years, because they do have such an impact on your life. So what were the moments you can recount of those, I guess, special moments like you mentioned about that with your parents in Beijing that you'd had with your coach across your career?
Yeah. Oh God, where do I even start? There was just so many moments. He was like my second dad. I saw him just as much as I saw my dad, you know. There was times where he would go to a competition with just me. Say if it was just me going from Plymouth, you kind of feel like he was your like safety blanket in a way. He was like your best mate at times. And I must admit, my coach, I'm not just saying this because he's mine, he was the most relaxed, happy, funny coach out there. You know, all the other coaches are amazing and it works for them. But Andy dealt with a lot of women. Like, all his divers were mainly girls, apart from like Tom and a few others. So I think he understood, you know, we have a lot of emotions. We go through a lot of emotions. So yeah, he was definitely like a father figure, but they were so hard to put your finger on what was so special, because he was just incredible from every session, every training session to every competition. If I did a bad dive and I was falling behind, he'd be like, don't worry about it, forget it, move on. And you do, and you moved on, and then all of a sudden I can get back into the medals just because he was like, move on. If it weren't for Andy, I don't think I'd be a 3-time Olympian, not at all.
That's a really nice testament. And I've got a book on my bookshelf that's got a whole chapter on Andy and some of the stuff he's done over the years.
No way.
Yeah, and it talked a lot about. It's funny you mentioned the emotional side of things, because the emotional intelligence of how to support, especially developing young people, because the person that walks through the door on Monday could be completely different by Wednesday, and then by the weekend when you're at a competition, it could be different again. And obviously, it wasn't, although it was one-to-one coaching, it was within a club environment, so you're juggling, lots of spinning plates. And actually, that's something that he appeared to do really well. And I find that fascinating, that as a coach of such a diverse group of people, different heights, different skills, different age groups, and actually still got a huge range of incredible results out of you all.
Absolutely. Totally agree with what you said then, completely. He's phenomenal. He really is. He really, really is.
Cool. Well, let's talk a bit about what happened next. So you made that transition, you finally stepped away. What was that first 6 months like?
First 6 months, I was like, right, I'm going to do some workouts, because obviously we have to do workouts all the time, but it was planned. So mine was like, I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to go to the gym and do this, do that. Buzzing for 6 months, probably, maybe even a little bit more. Then all of a sudden, when it got to roughly about a year, I started to be like, oh, I'm bored, because I've got no one pushing me, so I stopped working out for a little bit. I carried on coaching, because I was a coach for the young kids, which I really enjoyed. That was really, really good fun. But yeah, after a year, I kind of had a bit of a wake-up call, and I was like, oh, I have actually finished. Because at first it was all buzzing, everything was new. But yeah, after a while, it was like, okay, I am 27 or 28, and I've had my first job. This is what the real world looks like. I don't know if I like it. Because even though diving or any sport is really, really difficult, and, we have to work out twice a day, every day, that's all we had to do. That's all we had to worry about. But yeah, in the real world, my mum always warned me. She was like, you wait till you get to the real world. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But yeah, after a year, it was like, okay, this is it. But then I started to get into beauty, because I like the beauty side of things. I've always been one to like do your nails or makeup or hair. So I went and did a few courses for eyelash extensions. And before you know it, a few years later, I've got like 3 or 4 jobs. I don't stop. I do not stop. But yeah, it's changed massively. I miss the diving, but at the same time, I do enjoy living in the real world.
So talk us through what it looks like now. So fast forward 4 years from the bubbly first 6 months where you think, oh, this is great. I haven't got to get up at 6:30 in the morning and all that sort of stuff, to where we are now, where actually you look back and think, well, I have come a long way. And like you said, you're doing lots of different things. So let's talk through some of those things now that perhaps 4 years ago you couldn't have even imagined that you'd be doing now.
So on lockdown, I was doing lots and lots of workouts and posting them on my Instagram. And a guy called Pete Styrens actually got hold of me from Plymouth, from Cornwall, Devon. He got hold of me and said, would you like to join PT in Your Pocket? So PT in Your Pocket is a Facebook workout. They only see us. They just like comment and stuff. We can't see them, which is really nice for people that don't want to go to gyms or feel quite intimidated. It's really, really good platform. There's like 12 to 14 live workouts a week. And I was like, yeah, let's give this a go. It was a little bit of a wake-up call, doing a workout at 6:30 in the morning from home. That was completely different to what I'm used to. But so I do PT in Your Pocket. Same company, Program 10 is a 10-week course with fitness, nutrition, motivational talks, live workouts, pre-recorded workouts. And they do like once a week check-ins. So I do a lot of stuff around fitness still, which I love, because that's just very me. I do beauty from home. So I have a salon in my house. And I do Real Winners Plymouth, which is basically in the PO postcode. So only the guys that are in the PO postcode, unfortunately, can play. But it's really nice because they buy a ticket for like $1.99. They could win a PS5, weekend away and spa treatment, or for like $1.99 or something like that. And it's nice that everybody knows who the winner is, because it's roughly in your area. Whereas, if it's like a national competition, you never hear who the winner is, never. So it's really nice that everybody knows everyone. And yeah, I'm pretty busy. All I've got to do as well in between that is walk the dog. Yeah, which is manic because he's a big boy.
He is. I'm a little curious because I'm picking those things there. You've gone into the world of health and beauty, which is all around details and this idea of making things as refined as possible. And you've also got this world of health and fitness. And you've come off a career of where you've spent a lot of time working on health and fitness and making sure the details are spot on when you're doing your diving. So it almost feels like you've found that balance between, I guess, flexing some of those muscles, if you like, that you were using during your diving career in terms of focusing on details and those processes, but also keeping in touch with the health industry and the fitness industry. Do you feel like you've got that balance now?
I think so. I think this was like perfect opportunity for me. I'm so glad that they reached out to me. It's just something that I'm really, really into. And it's nice that I can bring something to the table that I know, just the little things of like, sacrifice, like this 10-week course. Yeah, they want to go out and have a life, but sometimes you might have to say no because I've got this goal to achieve by this amount of times. And that's what I went through. So it's nice that maybe I can give them my plans or my advice and just also keeping it fun, like that's for me. If I enjoyed something, I wanted to do it and I was good at it because I was enjoying it. And that's what I kind of want to do for these guys.
So what's next? What does the coming year look like? We've got a home Commonwealth Games, which I'm sure you'll be following with avid interest, but what else? Have you got anything in the pipeline that you think, oh, I'm really looking forward to that? Or have you got an ambition in 10 years time that you'll be doing something else?
No, because I've just started from lockdown doing all that. I just think keep going and I'm learning as I go on and hopefully I'm going to become better and better at it. With the Commonwealth Games, gutted really because there's just nowhere to stay in Birmingham. There's literally all the hotels are just crazy right now. We've tried, we can't even get a ticket to watch. So a little bit gutted I might not be there for Commonwealth Games, which is such a shame. But I'm going to keep trying. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Be nice to watch the little ones.
I was going to say, if someone's got any contacts out there, now would be a great time to reach out and get in touch with
you.
Absolutely. I want to ask something finally that I guess traverses both the diving career, but also what you're doing now, is around this concept of self-doubt, but also external doubters as well, because we are in a world where people always question, people trying new things or being brave or being creative. And I'm sure during your diving career, you had moments where you thought or somebody else said to you, I don't think you can do that, or that's beyond your ability. How does that sit with you now that you're in charge of what you're doing?
Yeah, I always think if you're feeling like you can't do it, why not show yourself you can do it, So, for example, in 2008, I'd made World Cup and World Championships for years and years, every year. And 2008 came along just before the Olympic Games. I didn't qualify for the world event because I came down in a handstand. And so I felt like I wasn't good enough. And I felt like, oh, I'm never going to make the Olympic Games now because of this and that. And then just one day, my mum and dad were saying, like, you can do this. You'll be silly to give up now. Just keep pushing yourself and prove that you can do it. And then one day I just thought, you know what? Maybe I do doubt myself, but I want to show that I can do it. Don't need to show anybody else. But I think as long as you show yourself that you are capable, don't doubt yourself, show yourself that you can do it. Anything is possible if you put your mind to it. And I want to carry on doing that as we go on in my lifestyle. If I feel like I don't want to do something, I'm scared of something, I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. And if I can't do it, that's fine, but I've tried, And if you don't try, you don't get, and you will never know where you're going to go in life if you don't try.
That's a really nice message. I think there's one more thing I want to ask, and especially with the rich range of things that you've done over so many years now, if you could go back 20 years to your 10-year-old self and actually say, oh, by the way, in 20 years' time, I'm going to have a salon at home. I'm going to be doing live PT workouts. I'm going to have been to 3 Olympic Games and got all these international medals. Number one, would you have believed yourself? And knowing everything, but now knowing everything that you do know and having experienced all of that, what would you say to that 10-year-old girl looking forwards?
Yeah, I would definitely not have believed someone if they said that. But yeah, looking forwards, just to take it all in, because it goes so fast. I did it for 18 years, and looking back now, I feel like I've blinked and it's completely over. So take every little moment in, appreciate what you're doing. There was times where, I was in China for a month, missing home, feeling like, I just want to go home. I should have enjoyed every moment I had, because there was times where, you do want to go home. But also think about what my future was going to hold, like I was so in the zone, I forgot that there is a life after diving. We had so much opportunity to have someone pay for courses after courses, and if you don't do it that year, that money just is completely gone and deleted, So I do wish that I did quite a few courses, because all the courses I've done myself, I could have had them paid for. But I would never have believed it if someone told me that you have achieved what you've achieved. Never in my wildest dreams.
But you've done it, and it's possible. And you've equipped yourself, I guess, with a set of tools that means the next 10, 20, 30 years are going to be equally exciting, and perhaps different avenues, but actually really exciting ones nonetheless. So that's a really nice way to put it all together. Tonia, thank you so much for your time. We'll make sure we include the links to your socials and everything else that you're up to in the show notes where everyone can follow up. But thank you so much for your time. It's been great.
Thank you so much. That was awesome.
What a great insight that was into the mind of someone who really has had a fascinating journey. A huge thank you again there to Tonia for sharing some time with us. Be sure to give Tonia a follow on Instagram, the link to which we've included in our show notes. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you have, please give us a quick rate and review, as we would really appreciate it. As always, a big thank you to both Luke Sugden and Carter Richardson for their help in producing the podcast. As we look forward, we've only got one more episode to come in 2021, and what a year it's been. We started the year in a lockdown, and since then we've released more than 30 shows from inspiring people all around the world. We will be finishing the year with a fascinating conversation about some mind-bending technology that is making more and more inroads into sports, business, and the wider world. Be sure to join us for our 60th episode, and in the meantime, thank you again so much for joining us for another episode of the Rogue Monkey Podcast.